Hi, everyone. This is kind of a first. We're 2 minutes from the start of the meeting and the other selectmen aren't here.
Now's your chance to run.
They're in the waiting room. Found them.
Darn.
I'm wondering if Mary Ann's, oh no, she's here. Here we go. Okay. That was close. Mary Ann, we ready? Mary Ann, you all set?
I don't think she can hear you.
No, I don't think so. Mayor, can you hear us? That's not good.
Oh, there she comes.
Can you hear us, Mary Ann? Okay, we'll call the meeting to order. It's 5:30. Welcome, everybody. Good evening. Look for approval of the minutes of the January 21st Board of Selectmen meeting.
So moved.
Dean, did you second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Look great.
All in favor?
Aye.
No communications, no appointments or resignations. Just a couple of things I'd like to report on. We've been kind of up and down here at Town Hall. We've had 3 positive cases in as many weeks. So we've been adjusting schedules and whatnot. Should all get back to a relative normal by Monday. Everybody is on the mend and recovering. 2 of our cases had very mild symptoms, so we're very fortunate and thankful for that. Wanted to talk a little bit about the 1B rollout and the vaccine. We've got a group of 4 volunteers that we worked with last week. They've collected a list of seniors 75 and over and 65 and over, and they started this week with phone call outreach to help people. Literally, the goal is you don't hang up the phone until someone who wants an appointment has an appointment. This cuts down on the confusion. When you think about the vast majority of this being done online and over the internet, that's a tough group to, that's a pretty heavy lift for our 75 and older for some of them. So that's kind of where we're at for vaccines. I met with DPH this morning. We meet once a week. I'm pushing to get a clinic here in town. There was some criticism of some of the issues that New Milford faced with their clinic at the high school last week. And one of the health directors said, show me a location that's not going to have some issues. I said, you come to Washington, I promise you won't have any issues. I should just schedule it. So
Good for you.
um, they're working on that. They're going to work on that to do a regional one with Washington, Roxbury, and Bridgewater. And I told them we'd be happy to host. Jay?
Jim, do you know how many seniors we're talking about 75 and over in town?
Just over, and 75 and over, just over 400, Jay.
That we don't know if any of them have been, that's just the number. You don't know if any of them have been vaccinated yet or not?
We actually do. When
Oh.
the group started making contact this week, they had put up a Google Docs spreadsheet, so it was
Yeah,
updated
great.
real time, and you can see. I went through it this afternoon. You can see received their first shot in January.
Yeah.
You know,
So
all that information. So yeah, we do have a pretty good idea.
So we still have 400 to go, or that 400 was the total number that we were trying to make sure get vaccinated?
That was the total number.
Oh, all right. So
we have
we're
in town. And
Yep.
oddly enough, the 65 to 75 is a smaller number. So, you know,
Well,
as soon as
great.
that's, and the thing with this is, and again, I think I mentioned this, the governor's order is not to have any vaccines wasted.
Right.
So we'll get phone calls and, you know, people will have an hour or 2 hours to get to a clinic, and,
Yeah,
you know, it's just the way it is. But when it becomes available, in the end, what we care about is people getting a shot in the arm. So
absolutely. Are you comfortable telling us who's doing the volunteer work, just so we can
yeah,
recognize them?
absolutely. It's Stacy Parachi, who works in the healthcare field. Jen Pody, one of our members of the Board of Education. Pam Collins, our Senior Center Director.
Great.
And Denise Arturi, who heads up our Judea Garden, is one of our registrars. And they're just, one of the easiest things I had to do was just simply put their 4 emails together, and they just took the ball and ran with it.
That's great. I just wanted to recognize them. That's why. So thank you. That's great.
Absolutely.
Appreciate all their work. The sooner the better we can get people vaccinated. It's great.
Yep. So I go into old business now, and I wanted to thank and welcome Wayne Heilman, Chairman of the Planning Commission. Wayne is here to tell us a little bit about Northwest Connect, which he also chairs.
Okay, well, thanks, Jim, and guys, thanks for your time. I actually came here today because I have a request of the Board of Selectmen, and Jim knows a little bit about this already, but I'll fill the rest of you in, and of course, will be happy to answer any of your questions. You know, in short, just cutting right to it, I would like the Board of Selectmen to consider a one-time expenditure in the next budget to fund a phase 1 engineering study for the town of Washington for the purposes of speccing out a fiber optic broadband fiber to the home grid for the town of Washington. Now, as you guys may know, with my work as chair of Northwest Connect, we've been working for years to enable basically fiber networks for the Northwest Hills towns. Yep. I think that Washington is kind of uniquely positioned to pursue this. Some of the other towns in our area have been doing work, as you may know. Some of them have formed working groups. Some have been conducting surveys. Norfolk is actually the farthest ahead of all of us. They are actually considering holding a town meeting this May about actually pulling the trigger on funding fiber for their community. They've been, I don't know where they are with that. It's sort of a moving target, but I'm not really asking for that at this time. I think we wouldn't be ready. I think this sort of thing is, you know, really has to be looked upon as a municipal infrastructure project. And because of that, you want to take several steps along the way. You want to make, you know, this sort of thing's a heavy lift, and you don't want to be diving into it too quickly. But I think funding a phase 1 would be a very prudent step at this point. Essentially, what a phase 1 engineering study would do is it would provide us with critical data on on a town-wide basis. It would give us, it would let us know, for example, how many poles are there in the town? Where are they? How many residences are served by poles and how many are served by underground conduits? I mean, we sort of know that as a community, but we would actually need the actual data. We need to know exactly where all of the backhaul fiber that currently exists in town is located. We need to know whether there are any distribution nodes that are already existing. The phase one would provide us with CAD drawings of all the proposed routes of the fiber. It would let us know not only, obviously we would be stringing fiber on all the streets and poles, but we would know, for example, what type of fiber would go on what road. If a road with a lot of homes might need a more robust fiber than say, a really sparsely populated road. So what we would get from a phase one engineering study is basically all of this information. We would get the locations, we would get the poles, we would get the proposed routes, the fiber strand counts for not only the trunk wiring on the poles, but also the drop wiring that goes from the poles to the houses. We would get drawings and plans for that. Also, we would get proposed sites for a hub or a hut location. And most importantly, we'd get what's called a bill of materials. You guys are probably familiar with this with the bidding process for other infrastructure projects. We would basically get a list of, okay, this is how many miles of this type of fiber you need, how many miles of that fiber, these are the terminals, the splicing cases, and when we would ever go to, pull the trigger on the project, this would be crucial when putting the project out to bid, because without this information, most installers wouldn't bother to bid on a town like Washington because it would be too small, it would be too risky. They'd essentially be bidding on a pig and a poke. And without this information, with this information, we could really entertain multiple bids. I would also tell you that at present, Jim probably knows this from the COG, Northwest Connect and the COG are currently conducting a phase one engineering study in the city of Torrington right now. We received a $100,000 grant through the CARES Act, and we are doing this very thing in Torrington. It's ongoing. We expect preliminary results in March or April, depending on weather, and we'll have a full report by June 1st. The firm that's doing that study right now is a firm called Pike Telecom. They're in Massachusetts. They have a lot of experience doing this. I would be happy to share their bid that they put in for Torrington, if that would help you get your heads around what this process entails. It's a bit technical, but if you want it, I'm happy to share it. And that's basically what I'm proposing here. I'd like the Board of Selectmen to consider this expense. It's a one-time expenditure, and we would get a study report that would be crucial down the road, and it also would be a study that would be valid for several years. It's not like a year or two or three later it would become obsolete, because the only thing that could really substantively change a phase one report would be if we had a massive housing development in Washington between now and then, which I think we all agree would be highly unlikely.
Happen.
So that's basically it. I'd love to, I'll answer your questions. I would, go ahead, Dean.
Several things, Wayne. And let's start with a little bit of housekeeping for Jim. I think have we moved into new business?
Not yet. We're in old business.
Okay, but I think this sort of falls into new business. I would say so. I guess I have a zillion questions, Wayne, but I'm not sure that this is the right time in this preliminary discussion. What are you looking for us? We can make a motion, I suppose, to look at this, to whether we want to fund this. I don't think we can make a decision, but that's for really Jim and Jay.
Right. I no, I don't expect you to decide today. Basically why I'm here today is I know it's budget time. So
Right.
I want you, I mean, you no doubt are getting requests from different departments and different commissions and whatnot about for funding priorities for the next fiscal year. And I just wanted to put my chit on the table.
Right. Okay. So then I'll wrap up with a couple quick questions that are specific to it. Then, what are we talking about in terms of cost? If you had a rough gauge of what a phase one's going to cost, grants availability, and I hate to be this ignorant, and I was a recording engineer, so I should know better a little bit more about this. But what does fiber really get us, and what's the mass improvement? I could get it in a city like Torrington, what's the citizenry gaining over having fiber optics over what we have, and where it seems like we're sort of benefiting the telecommunication companies somewhat in the process of doing this. But anyhow, so I think I've asked enough.
Oh no, that's fine. Well, let's take them in order. First, I think my request would be, I mean, I'll try to fine tune it more, but somewhere in the range of $20,000 to $25,000.
Okay.
It's the Torrington study is taking $100,000. They have about something north of 16,000 residences. We have about 2,200. Now, when I looked at the Pike Telecom bid for Torrington, they based their bid essentially on a flat rate of $6 per home with 16,000 plus homes that got 96. Their bid ended up being like 98 and change. In speaking with a couple,
phase one.
What?
For just
for the phase one, right?
Okay.
That's what they're doing right now, which I'm proposing for Washington. I also spoke with a couple of people that said in more rural communities like ours, the Pike model, instead of doing it based on homes, they might do it based per pole. And that's because of if you think about it, if you think about any provider stringing like a phone line or a cable line or a fiber line in a town, if you have a very densely populated area, you could conceivably serve 10 homes per pole. Where in a town like Washington, it's the exact opposite. It's probably 10 poles per home. So, I mean,
I like the $6 per home. Let's get them to hold to that for us.
Yeah, well, we could try, but again, anything like this would have to be put out to bid. And I'm assuming you would put it out to bid. I would think you would. In the RFP process, different companies will do different, formulas. I mean, there's conceivably maybe 3,000 utility poles in the town of Washington. So at $6 a pole, you'd be looking at like roughly 18,000. I mean, I checked with the assessor. We actually don't know how many poles there are in the town of Washington. I mean, I could call Eversource, but I don't think they'd tell me.
They don't know, Wayne.
Yeah.
We know how many light poles we have now, but that's about all.
Right.
I think they might tell the fire marshal.
So
Eversource, by the way, but
yeah. So anyway, but to your other point is, so what does this gain? What do we gain from this? You're probably hearing, no doubt, complaints from many people about, poor internet service. And what the difference between fiber and anything else that we have, mainly cable, is that not only do you get faster speeds, but more importantly, you get what's called symmetric service. In other words, the bits coming in are the same as the bits going out, which is not the case with what you have right now. I mean, Spectrum will always advertise 200 megabits per second or 300 megabits per second. That's coming into your house. What's going out is a small fraction of that, roughly 10%, which is, anyone who's ever been thrown off a Zoom meeting knows, is really insufficient, especially during busy times of day. That's the one problem with cable is that it's what we call asymmetric service. The second problem we have with cable is that it is run on what's called shared subscriber lines, which is like, you just think, so which is why at certain times of the day, if everyone's on at once, it's like I-95 on a Friday afternoon. And So fiber eliminates both of those problems. Plus, fiber service typically is gigabit speed in both directions. The positive impact on economic and community development is just, it goes without saying. I mean, problems with connectivity for remote, for distance learning, for remote work, for telemedicine, all those connectivity issues are solved. And plus, fiber is not only at gigabit speeds right now, they can provide up to 10 gig speeds. I mean, it's exponentially expandable over time. As much as an infrastructure could be future-proof, fiber really is.
I got it. I get it. And it makes perfect sense. And I know Jay's trying to get in here, and
That's
I
okay.
apologize.
Nope, you're
All
asking
good.
good.
Well, here's my question, Wayne, and maybe this is more of a kind of a philosophical question. Seems like if we want to improve the power grid, we're not running power lines. The power company is.
Right.
Why, I mean, the telecommunication companies aren't they running fiber? And why are the municipalities doing it for them?
Because they're not. They're not running fiber here, and they're not going to.
That's
And the one word answer why is money. It's very expensive, and economically speaking, from a business standpoint, we're not worth it to them. The finite resources they have in terms of investing in infrastructure is going to be steered towards densely populated areas. So and the reason I know this is because they've said so to my face. I mean, I have emails from Frontier basically saying point blank that they have no plans to install fiber on any of their poles in our neck of the woods in the foreseeable future. And Spectrum is the same thing.
Okay.
And if you look at what's happened with Verizon and T-Mobile and all those, they're not going to come out here and do any more towers out here either. That was part of the issue that came up with our cell service. So
it's
not worth it to them.
It's not worth it. And the thing is, they're not required to. One of the things that you have to understand is that, the electric company and the landline phone company are utilities. They are regulated by law. They have to provide universal access at affordable rates. Eversource and Frontier can't pick and choose which roads they string their cables on. They have to do them all, even the ones that are money losers, like in rural areas in the Northwest Hills. But the cable companies and the wireless companies are not classified as utilities by the FCC, and they don't have to provide universal access. And as we well know, they don't. And they won't. If we want this level of connectivity, we're going to have to do it ourselves. Now, the one question you did ask, I forgot to answer, Dean, was in terms of subsidy or federal grants or loans. The short answer is no, we don't qualify for them. We're sort of in a black hole. We are not rural enough to qualify for the rural broadband initiatives sponsored by the USDA and the FCC and whatnot, but we're not suburban enough for any of the private companies to want to bother to invest in any of the infrastructure. We're in no man's land, basically. Sure, Jay.
So I think this is something I've been looking at for a while, that I would. The issue to me always is, what the heck is the cost? And that's a difficult number to come by. One of the thoughts I had was, and we can talk about this at a budget meeting, but is to do an RFP right now and to get a cost for it. Putting out a bid doesn't mean we have to sign a contract with anybody. Putting out a bid now tells us, yes, Wayne's in the ballpark is 25,000, or no, it's it's 100,000, or, at least we know what the number is, so we could budget for that if we decide to do it, rather than putting in 20 grand in the budget, or 25, then go out to bid and find out it's 50 grand. We only budgeted 25. I don't know how fast, Wayne, you could put together some kind of a bid. I think you have some, and that's, again, we could talk about it when we have a budget meeting, but I think that's something to think, because it doesn't cost us anything to go put a bid out, is what I'm getting.
That's right. And the short answer, Jay, is that we could basically cut and paste the bid that we used for Torrington, and just
Yeah.
insert Washington and
Well-
and change the, change the number of road miles and the number
Yeah,
of houses,
right.
and
So-
basically you're there.
And I just like to suggest we think the three, think about it. Maybe at one of our next budget meetings, we could think about doing something like that. And that, and again, that way, at least we know what the price is. I do think it's a good idea to go out and, assuming the price is something we can afford, and get a study done so we really know whether this is worth it. I've had number of people come to me, and I do think it makes a big impact on economic development. But the more and more that we've been having these Zoom meetings, and people are using teleconferencing with their doctors and that kind of thing, it really says to me that it's something I'd like the town to consider. I have no idea what the costs are going to be. And so a study like this would at least tell us, where we're going. And to me, for 25,000, I would support it. I just don't know if that's a realistic number. So that's where I'm at.
Sure, and that's an easy way to find out. Putting together an RFP at
Yeah.
this point, we already have, Northwest Connect already has a successful one. We can just
Right.
use it as a template.
Right.
So,
All right. Let us,
I'm happy to supply that. We could,
If-
I can get you that info in a matter of days.
well, if you could do that, that'd be great. And then we can talk, and we'd have to obviously, approve maybe at another meeting, a motion to do that. But I don't think like I said, it doesn't cost us anything to do that. And at least that way, and you can put in the bid, hold the price until, August 1st or something, whatever, so it's in the new year if we decide to fund it.
Well, absolutely, and plus, we're doing, Pike is doing the phase one right now in Torrington, and the reason that's taking so long is because it's winter time. If you're able to schedule it for nicer weather, it would be, the report would show up sooner.
All right. So if you could,
Wayne, is there a sense, two things, will this seed money, it will provide a cost estimate of what it will be to connect Washington, so to speak?
Well, what it will provide is what's called a bill of materials. It will, when, based on that report, we could get a much more, not only could we get a much more accurate estimate of what the project would cost the town, it would also allow individual property owners to get a better idea of what it would cost to connect their homes.
Mhm.
The other thing that you get from a phase one engineering study is they actually go and they GIS map basically all the homes in the town. And they look at some homes and say, well, this house is, if it's like my house, for example, which is about 100 feet from the road, and there's a pole right out there in my front yard, and, the connection is incredibly simple. That's not going to be very expensive. That's not going to be an expensive install. But if you've got a large home tucked away on 30 acres, a quarter of a mile from the road, well, that's going to cost more.
Mhm.
So, but what we can find out from the phase one is, okay, how many of those homes are there like that? And we also find out, we have some streets in our town that don't have poles. They have undergrounded utilities. I think the Beebrook condos is probably the example we can all think of. Well, what they'll do is they'll not only look at, okay, well, what kind of conduit is in there? Okay, who owns it? Is there space in that conduit for another line? And, and if, because if there is, and they can blow their fiber through it, that's one cost. If there's no space, then they have to micro trench the fiber. That's another cost. And, you find out on a street level what, not only what's involved, what would be involved in installing this, but you also find out, at the street level, okay, what type of fiber does this street need? I mean, you might have a main thoroughfare that might need an 8-strand fiber. You may have a little cul-de-sac that only needs a 2 or 4-strand fiber. And the report will be that specific.
Great.
So, and the other question I had, Wayne, was at what point in the process and how do we determine demand for this product? How do we know how many people are going to sign on to this in Washington? Do we need to spend $25,000 or $50,000 and then say, okay, we've got this base of information. Now we have to determine who's going to use this and who's going to benefit. Out of 2,200 potential customers, where do we draw the line? Is the line 300, 500, 1,000, where we say, okay, it's just not practical to do?
Good
Well,
question.
there are two ways to look at this. I mean, some of the other communities have, have formed working groups, are doing surveys. But those towns that are doing surveys basically fall into two general groups right now. You have towns such as Salisbury or Sharon or Norfolk or Falls Village, where you have whole swaths of the community that have nothing. Okay, so the survey results you get there are different than the results that you get in a town like Washington or Barkhamsted or Litchfield, where you basically have pretty much full coverage through the local cable company. Okay, so you're going to get, so when you're in towns like ours or Barkhamsted, you're going to get survey results that really complain about cost and level of service more than the other towns where you get basically a sense of urgency, where it's like they sent my kid home with a Chromebook and it's a brick because there's nothing to connect to. So they're depending on the community that you're surveying, you can get I guess what you would call a biased result. That doesn't mean that we shouldn't be doing, you could do SurveyMonkey or whatever. It's very inexpensive and you can get a sense there. I mean, at a certain point, you'd want to do a market analysis, and we're not there yet. But I can tell you historically that most internet service providers want to see an eventual what they call take rate. In other words, the take rate is basically, okay, if I provide service in this town, how many people are going to sign up? Okay. And most providers want to see an eventual 40% take rate. At that point, they know they're profitable and it's worth their while. So, and in towns that have done this and followed through, the take rates initially are typically over 50%. So, and then, I mean, in some of the towns in Western Massachusetts that are doing this, they have take rates of 85, 90%. But then you have to keep in mind that prior to the fiber coming in, they had nothing except like satellite or dial up. So they were the only game in town. That's not the case here. So,
Right. But my thing is, how far do we go with this and how much money do we spend without knowing what the return on our investment is? And in other words, the initial numbers, I think, were in the millions to connect the entire
Yes.
town.
Yes.
How do we determine if we're going to have the usage? I mean, what if only 100 households or 200 households or 200 businesses sign up for this and no one else? How do we do that?
Well, first you get more information, which is what you would get from the phase one. As I mean, you can gauge rough sentiment with a SurveyMonkey type survey, but those aren't really as accurate as a market analysis, because a SurveyMonkey is inherently biased to begin with, because it's only taken by people who have an interest. It's not a random sample of your community. So you may end up getting a rosier prediction than may exist out there. There will always be a segment of the community that has no interest. I mean, you may have some seniors in town who, they don't even have internet now. So what do they care? And you may have a segment that's like, well, I only use the internet to watch Netflix and whatever, and I'm fine. But if you have conversations with people who are working from home, or people who have kids in the schools, or people who have health issues that are trying to, do telemedicine visits with their healthcare providers, that the system we have right now is barely hanging on, and it's only going to get worse. The reason Spectrum isn't upgrading the coax cable on the poles to fiber is they can't afford it. And they can't make the coax cable that's on the poles give us the service we want, because it's a copper-based system that was put up in the 1970s and 80s. It was designed to deliver TV to our houses. It was never designed to deliver internet. And they're making it work as best they can, but they've basically hit a brick wall.
Jay?
Jim, I think you've got a good point, but because clearly we're not going to go spend millions of dollars without knowing who's going to come in here and how much of the service is going to be used. And there's a long discussion about how do we set this up? Are we the provider? I mean, there's a lot of questions to answer. I know, when we go down. But I don't know how we could even do a survey to anybody without knowing at least an estimate of what the cost would be. Wayne has, probably a better handle on that than anybody, but to me, without the survey, we couldn't realistically say, we're expecting this to cost X amount of money per household, per month, per year. I don't even know how we bill it out unless we have this basic information to start us off with. But I do think this is one small step before we even get close to talking about, the type of money we're talking about. But I don't know how we can ask people to support it without being able to give them some realistic numbers.
No, I agree with that. And I wasn't advocating not putting a toe in the water.
No, I understand.
I'm just kind of curious as to where in the process we say this is doable or this is,
Well,
needed. But no, I support that 100%, Wayne.
Yeah. A phase one gets you closer because then,
Right.
Armed with that data, you can make a more accurate,
right.
estimation than I can do. The last time I appeared before the Board of Selectmen, I basically gave you my, back of the envelope math about it. Armed with a phase one study, you can get much more accurate than a back of the envelope calculation.
Understood.
And the other thing too is like, one of the things that, to be clear here, is that Northwest Connect is not proposing nor endorsing the town getting into the providing business. This is strictly an infrastructure project. We are talking about the town simply putting the fiber on the poles. A private provider provides the internet service. It's like one of the mistakes that many communities have made with fiber build outs is they all of a sudden had illusions they were going to become a municipal cable company or something. That is not, I repeat, not what we are proposing here. The way you need to think about this is, like I said, as infrastructure.
Yep.
The fiber on the poles is a community asset, just like the roads, just like the parks, just like the school, just like the garage. It's
So Wayne, to that end, when those lines come down in a winter storm, who fixes them?
The same company who's providing the service. When they provide the service, they also provide the maintenance. They basically provide a maintenance contract. And in the towns in Western Massachusetts that are doing this, that's exactly how they have it set up. In fact, there's a local provider in Western Massachusetts that would love to provide service to Washington, Connecticut. So finding a provider is not a problem. We already have a provider lined up, and the beauty of fiber is that you could have multiple providers. If Verizon wanted to sell their Fios service on it, they could if they wanted to.
Wayne, would any of those eager providers be willing to make an investment, albeit not the whole investment, but put anything into the infrastructure?
I doubt it.
Okay.
I seriously doubt it. It's like, again, we have these are large companies. They make their decisions based on census data and marketing analyses and whatnot. And they look at the towns in the northwest corner and they see aging populations that are declining. It's not a place where they would sink one penny into infrastructure.
Into technology.
Yeah.
Understood.
I've got about three things, I think, Wayne.
Sure.
So ROI, you mentioned it, Jimmy. Where's the ROI coming from? I mean, if we own the wire, I get that, but if we're not a provider, which I really like, is the company paying us to be a provider? Are they paying per customer or something to the town? Or is this an investment that we see it only, we're not recouping anything, we're strictly providing it?
I sort of in between those two. The idea that it would generate revenue for the town and pay for itself is not realistic, any more than paying for the roads is, the roads paying for themselves is realistic, or the school paying for it. Again, it's an infrastructure project, and then short of like a sewer system, most municipal infrastructure doesn't pay for itself. However, they don't get it for free. I mean, they would have, a provider who's using our fiber, our dark fiber, would pay basically user fee or rent or whatever you want to call it, which is something that's done in the industry right now. For example, to give you an example that you can relate to in the town, there are two what we call backhaul providers that have fiber running through Washington right now. One is CEN, the used to know as the Nutmeg Network, and they have a fiber backhaul running through the town, which we've tapped into for our Wi-Fi and the depot service. They also supply fiber optic internet to Region 12, to the Gunnery, I think to the library now. I'm not sure, but if not
I
soon.
believe the water. Yeah.
And there's also a private company called Crown Castle who provides dark fiber internet running through the town. They have a backhaul line running the length of 202, I think on parts of 47 and 109. So again, for my example here, AT&T, who has an antenna on the tower in the depot, AT&T doesn't have a fiber line running through our town. They basically rent backhaul fiber from Crown Castle so that they connect their antenna to fiber to the internet.
Right.
So if we have fiber on our streets of Washington, whatever provider wants to sell to our citizens, basically rent or pay a user fee for that fiber, if for no other reason than for us to be able to maintain the fiber, and to put it up if a storm knocks it down or things like that. So
Got it. So there's not a return on investment, but we would not recoup, but there is some.
There is a revenue
Service fee.
stream.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a revenue stream, but it's
Got it.
really designed to keep it up and running.
Okay, so I love the RFP idea. That doesn't cost us anything. Let's get some proposals. But in that vein, some other municipalities that got to be close to ours have completed phase one plans. Can we get our hands on one of those? And at least it's not going to be exact, but at least it's going to give us an idea of, somebody else has already paid for one. Let's steal that, or borrow that rather, and at least have something that we can, before we're trying to get the town to spend 50,000, at least we could say, here's what we think this is the range. This is going to cost us ultimately 5 years down the road. This is going to be a $5 million project. What's the thought on that?
Well, we'll have one for Torrington in a few months.
Yeah, I can't believe that's very analogous, but it's got to be. And can we get that one? Can we?
Well, it's a public document, I'm sure.
Well, it's paid for by the Northwest Hills Council of Governments. So
We'll get it.
technically
Okay.
Jim can get a copy. And as chair of Northwest Connect, Northwest Connect, as Jim knows, advises the COG on all matters broadband. And we were the ones who actually put together the RFP for it. So yes, we can get access to it.
Okay. So that's it for me. I love the idea from a selfish point of view. Of course, I'd love to have it, but it seems, wildly ambitious on the face of it. But
well, I mean, it's a heavy lift, but it shouldn't be done cavalierly. I mean, in all candor here, I mean, if some angel dropped millions of dollars in our lap and said, string up fiber in Washington on me, I would tell you to wait because we're not ready. I mean, it's like, even if you took the money out of the equation, and the money is a huge part of the equation, let's be honest. I mean,
right.
There are other issues you have to engage in with here. It's like, I liken it to if you've ever been on a construction site. When you raise a wall, it's not like a bunch of guys get together and all just say 1, 2, 3 lift. There's a lot of planning that goes into raising that wall, and a lot of things you got to put into place before you even attempt, before you even start it. That's kind of how I look at this. And phase one is one of those preliminary steps that you want to take before you'd even think about the heavy lift.
Sure, of course.
Well, I know from my perspective, I've been thinking about this quite a bit in the last couple of years of how to get to this point. And I've heard Wayne talk, I've read stuff, I've been online with the state and read, what's going on at Northwest Connect as well. And it just seems there have been a more of a groundswell lately of people having an interest in this happening in town. I see it as a benefit to businesses in town and keeping, and people working from home. That to me, I'd like to look into doing like I said, doing the RFP to see what it costs, because I think it's a well worth it. If it's 25,000, I think that's worth it for us to at least get a better handle on where we stand in town to move forward. So,
And it may well be less. I mean,
yeah. That'd be great. So
Wayne, thank you. Thanks for all the time you put into this.
I'm here to serve.
Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne.
Okay.
Anything else on old business? Okay, we'll go into new business, and this technically is not, it's strange, but for years and years, and this goes back to the 1920s, the Board of Selectmen has also been the fire commission. And according to the fire department and the town, we as the board should be approving the elected chief each year. And it's just something we've gotten away from. Long story short, I put it in here. I'd like to make a motion that the Board of Selectmen, acting as the town fire commission, accept the results of the election of the Washington Volunteer Fire Department with Chief Craig Wilbur.
I will happily second that motion to accept the entire slate of officers.
Any discussion? Oh, sorry,
Well,
Jay,
maybe
go
this
ahead.
is a different discussion, but what does it mean that we're the fire commissioner?
I like to think all it means is we have this one task per year.
Okay, if that's
And
it, I'm good with
you
it.
don't meddle other than the budget.
Just
That's
want to be
it.
clear. That's I signed up for a lot of stuff, but I'm not sure there's anyway. Yeah, I fully support them and wish them well.
Great. All in favor?
Aye.
I will say that they are town employees. They're volunteers, but they're town employees. So I do get that this formality is probably an important one.
Yep, no problem.
Yep, and they've got a great slate. We thanked outgoing Chief Wright a couple of weeks ago. They've got a great incoming slate, experienced guys, very dedicated. We're very blessed to have them.
Absolutely.
Anything from our visitors tonight? Anybody? Michelle?
Thanks. I just wanted to speak in favor of the phase 1 engineering study for the fiber optics plan. Moving this whole concept forward is a goal of economic and community development. Not putting it up, because as Wayne said, we're not there yet, but to start with some of the education and outreach, helping with the survey, just seeing where we are as a town. I think it's really important thinking about this for the future, because even though the cable might be serving most of us well now, we all know with technology, it becomes outdated and slow quickly. And so it's hard to even imagine what the future will hold. Everything's becoming high definition, the files are getting bigger, the programs, it's not hard to imagine that what we have will not be adequate even 5 years from now. So, and it's really important, I think, that Washington not be the last town in the northwest corner to invest in this, because we want people to live here, whether they're splitting their time with New York City and want to be able to work from home, or their kids are doing their schoolwork, or businesses bringing, having high-tech work happening. This, I think, is going to be the future. So I just wanted to speak in favor of that.
Thanks, Michelle.
Thank you.
Anyone? Joan?
I just want to repeat what Michelle said and also put in a word for us seniors. Some of us are very interested in anything that will increase the internet for us, because especially with COVID, we spend a lot of time on the internet. That's all.
Absolutely, Joan. I got that.
Thank you, Joan. Ted?
As Mike Jackson, the finance chair, wanted to be here and couldn't be here, but I think he shares the view that I share, that we have, in my family, we're doing a lot of work from home, and we've got kids here working from home, and the internet is constantly dropping out, and we're losing Zoom calls, and we get cut off. Our TVs don't run because they're hooked to the internet and not to a cable box. So I can't be supportive enough of moving forward with the phase 1 process. That's it.
Thanks, Ted. Anyone else? Dimitri?
I just want to reiterate, we had a slight discussion about this at planning the other night. I think we're looking at a very new population as well as an aging population. And I think that we're going to be seeing a consistent shift to full-time residents working from home. We're going to continue to see education happening remotely. Even after the schools reopen, we're going to see a lot more remote education. And I think, and we're certainly going to be seeing a lot more telemedicine. And I'm not even going to get into the gamers and the streaming video people and a nightmare of services that are now available only through the internet and pretending to look like TV. So we have a real possibility of being a cutting edge community on a number of levels. And I don't think we should underestimate the value of that for the future economic and population values to the town. So I'm all for this. And I certainly would love to give up a couple $100 a month and 2 cable systems in my house that I would be able to run on one fiber system. Thank you very much.
Thanks,
Thank you,
Tammy.
Dimitri.
Anyone else? Hearing no one, I would accept the motion to adjourn.
I'll
So
make a
moved.
motion to adjourn.
All in
Second.
favor? Aye.
Aye.
Wayne,
Thank
thanks
you,
again.
everybody.
Appreciate it. Thank you,
everybody.
everyone.
Appreciate your input.
Wayne, you dropped out for a second during your presentation, and that was a little cheesy. I think you did that purposely, and I'm not buying it for a second.
No, that was Spectrum catching wind of what I was talking about and cutting me off before you got the message.
Very cheesy move.
Thanks, guys. Good night, everyone.